Good evening. Welcome to Huntingdonshire District Council Development Management Committee meeting. I would like to make you all aware that this meeting is being live streamed by the Council's YouTube channel. Please ensure that any mobile phones are switched to silent, so welcome to those who are watching at home. I would also like to outline some housekeeping arrangements. If you wish to speak, please do so to myself. To enable your microphone, press the middle button that will turn green and the microphone will light up red at the top to indicate this has happened. Please press the middle button when you have finished speaking, as it is particularly important that all members use their microphone so that the audio can be picked up through the live stream. In the event of a fire alarm sounding in the middle of a meeting, please stand and follow the meeting administrator to the meeting evacuation point outside of the building. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillors Dew, Jordan, Mockbull and Slade.
Thank you very much. Oh, thank you. The first item on the agenda is to approve the minutes for the last meeting held on the 19th of May. Do we all agree these minutes are a correct record of the meeting? Item 2 on the agenda is members' interests. Are there any members that would like to declare an interest in relation to any items on the agenda this evening? Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. With respect to application 3A, Huntingdon, I'm a Huntingdon Ward Councillor, but it's an application from the District Council itself. I sit as a member of Cabinet, but I've not been the portfolio holder responsible for leading on the work. So while it's come up and there's awareness of it, it's been referenced in papers that we've brought forward to committees and so on. I haven't had any particular involvement in it, and having taken advice, I feel comfortable proceeding in discussion and debate on the item.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wakeford. Councillor Sanderson.
Chair, just to say, item 3A, I'm the local county councillor for that area.
Thank you very much. Councillor McAdam.
Thank you. Just to say that item 3A, I'm a member of Huntingdon Town Council and have never been involved in any meetings or discussions regarding item 3A. Thank you.
Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. Just to be different, it's 3B. I'm the ward councillor. I'm also parish councillor, but was not in attendance for the parish council meeting where they discussed it.
Thank you for explaining that. Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Chair. So similar to Councillor Wakeford, I was previously a member of the Cabinet and a couple of years ago when this would have come up, but in the similar vein, I wasn't a portfolio holder, wasn't involved in any active decisions regarding that case.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pitt. Therefore, we will move on to item 3A on the agenda, which is a planning application for works in Hinchingbrook Country Park, and that will be presented to us by our planning officer, Lucy Bateman.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening. This application seeks planning permission for enhancement works to Hinchingbrook Country Park. This includes an extension to the existing countryside centre, new car parking, including new electric vehicle charging, improved access, biodiversity enhancements and other associated improvements and works. The application is referred to Development Management Committee as the application has been submitted by Huntingdonshire District Council for its own development. So the slide here shows the application site, which covers an area of approximately 3.5 hectares. This includes the existing access to the country park, the existing car parking area in the north of the site, the countryside centre, a play area, an open area of open space, footpaths and existing play areas around the park, and a footpath around the main lake. And again, just showing the application site boundary. So I'll just move on and talk through the proposals. So starting at the existing access and car parking area, the proposal includes resurfacing and widening of the existing internal access road. This will enable two-way traffic flows. The proposal also includes resurfacing and widening of an existing path to the west of the existing car parks, that's shown in pink, and that's to create a 2.5 to 4 metre wide shared cycleway and footpath into the site. The proposal also includes some improvements to the existing car park area. The gravel parking area will remain as existing, but spaces will be better defined, and additional soft landscaping is proposed within the car park area. And then moving further south into the site, again, an existing internal access road is proposed to be widened, which continues into the site towards the countryside centre, and this will also provide vehicular access to the new car park area. As you can see in the photos, there's an existing substation in situ, and as part of the soft landscaping proposals, it's proposed to provide some screening and planting. And then the existing countryside centre area, an area of vehicle parking spaces will be retained adjacent to the existing countryside centre, as well as new cycle parking facilities. You can see the footprint of the countryside centre, and I'll show you the detailed floor plans in just a second, but an external terrace and seating area is proposed to serve the function space and the cafe. So here we have the existing and proposed floor plans for the countryside centre. So the proposals include extensions to the front, side and rear of the building. This will create a new cafe, increase the size of the function space and provide improved WC facilities to the rear of the building. Moving on to the elevations, we've got the south and north elevation. So the north elevation is the one that faces into the existing car park area. And then just for comparison, some photos of the existing building and car park area. And the proposed south and west elevation. So as you can see, the west elevation, that's the main frontage with large window openings and doors on the front elevation, which will serve the cafe, lobby and function room. And this will provide access to the covered external area with seating. And again, just some photographs of the existing building. The proposed materials are timber cladding to reflect the existing building, recycled rubber roof tiles, a cedar and green roof to the rear for the extension, and some solar panels on the front elevation. Moving on to the proposed new car park. This would create 116 additional car parking spaces, including disabled and electric vehicle charging spaces. The layout of the car park has been designed to respect the woodland edge to the north, and it would be roughly located in the existing area. Just point that out if I can get there. An existing grassed area and the existing play area, which is just surrounded by that picket fence. As you can see, the proposed plans show that the existing double slide is to be retained, but all other play equipment in that area is to be removed. Paragraph 7.10 of the officer report incorrectly stated that the zip line is to be retained and relocated elsewhere. The applicant has advised officers that the majority of the equipment, including the zip line, around 20 years old and beyond the expected lifespan, and would have been removed due to safety concerns in any event. And then just in terms of the car park layout, it's been divided into 4 distinct areas separated by footpath links to the existing woodland and northern parkland footpath. And we've also got a proposal for a new footpath to the south of the car park, linking up with the countryside centre and the existing northwestern footpath. In terms of materials, the eastern end of the car park will be block paved, and the western end, which forms the overflow car parking area, So it's just that area there in the purple. This would be reinforced grass spaces, would be separated from the main car park by gates. And then moving on to the footpath improvements. This will connect up with the western end of the proposed car park. Proposal is to resurface with permeable asphalt, but maintain the existing width, and also the provision of adult and junior cycle parking adjacent to the existing play areas. And then moving on to the main lake. There's currently, as you can see in the photos, an unsurfaced grass footpath on the north side of the lake. The proposal looks to surface this with asphalt to form a 2 to 3 metre wide path. And then on the south side of the lake, it's an existing gravel path to be upgraded to asphalt. The existing public right-of-way is already hard surfaced, and that is to remain as existing. The new surface footpath, as shown here, will extend up to the canoe club area and the fishing platform. And then just moving around the lake, there are 2 small areas to be raised, as shown in pink. They'll be raised by up to 600 millimetres to provide improved pedestrian cycle access during periods of flooding, and no objection has been raised by the Environment Agency on this. So to just briefly run through the key considerations for this application, in terms of the principle of development, this is set out in paragraph 7.2 to 7.14 of the report. Local Plan Policy LP3 and the Neighbourhood Plan Policy NE3 support proposals which improve accessibility and quality of existing green infrastructure, contribute to the recreational purpose and biodiversity value of the park, as well as support healthy living and well-being. The proposal also looks to enhance an existing community facility, which is supported by Policy LP22. In terms of design, urban design and landscape officers have raised no objections, subject to conditions. The new car park area would result in some localised harm to the immediate landscape, but officers are satisfied that there's suitable mitigation proposed. This includes 3 wildflower bunds to the south of the proposed car park, as well as native hedge and tree planting to the boundaries and soft landscaping within the car park, which would all serve to soften those views, particularly from the open grassland to the south of the car park. In terms of heritage assets, a condition is recommended to secure an archaeological investigation. Residential amenity, given the nature and the proximity of the proposals to residential properties, it's not considered there would be any adverse impact on amenity. It is acknowledged in the report the widening of the internal access road is in close proximity to rear boundaries of properties, but this is an existing relationship and it's not considered the increase in vehicle movements would be detrimental. In terms of highway safety and parking, the widening of the internal road would improve space for vehicle movements within the site. The shared footpath and cycle paths leading into the park would improve access for all users of the site. And cycle parking is proposed in various locations across the park. The applicant has submitted a parking justification summary sheet to support the proposed new car park. This sets out the existing parking is insufficient to meet demands during busy periods such as the school holidays, weekends and events. The eastern end of the car park is proposed to meet day-to-day demand, whereas the western end would comprise overflow parking for special events and school holidays, those busy periods. Officers are satisfied that the proposed car park extension has been based on evidence and is clearly justified by the applicant. In terms of flooding and drainage, no objection from the LLFA or Environment Agency, subject to conditions. In terms of biodiversity, the application has been supported by the required ecological reports and surveys. The ecology officers raised no objection, subject to conditions, and the development is capable of providing the minimum 10% net gain. And lastly, in terms of trees, the application has been supported by tree reports, which have been reviewed by the tree officer. Conditions have been recommended for further investigation in relation to the widening of the internal access road, as well as the alignment of new underground services. But the wording of that condition has been agreed by the tree officer. So the officer recommendation is for approval, subject to those conditions set out at the end of the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much for bringing a thorough report to committee. We will now move on to speakers for this particular application. We have 2 speakers. Our first speaker is Councillor Patrick Cadwell from Huntingdon Town Council. So welcome to the committee and for joining us this evening. You have 3 minutes in which to address the committee.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my name is Patrick Cadwell, Deputy Mayor of Huntingdon. I'm here on behalf of Huntingdon Town Council, which supports this application and recommends approval. The proposal aligns with Policy NE3 of the Huntingdon Neighbourhood Plan, which seeks to protect and enhance open green spaces for recreational use, biodiversity, and community well-being. The application is considered to make a positive and sustainable contribution to the recreational use of the park, providing improvements that will increase accessibility, promote inclusive use, and support healthier lifestyles for local residents. It strengthens the role of the green space as a valued community asset and is consistent with the local aspiration to preserve and improve the quality and functionality of natural environments within the town. Furthermore, the development is in keeping with the principles of sustainability development outlined in the National Planning Policy Framework and PPF, particularly in terms of enhancing local health and well-being, improving public open space, supporting opportunities for active travel and outdoor recreation. In summary, the application is compatible with both local and national planning policies and represents a well-considered investment in the long-term vitality and use of Huntingdon's green infrastructure. Thank you. And I just want to say as well, I'm also a district councillor, so it's just to take a note on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? Councillor Tevlin.
Thank you. With the proposal, the suggestion is of removing the old play equipment. Would Huntingdon Town Council be looking at putting the new equipment back in? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I think Huntingdon Town Council has discussed it and approved it. So I think the officer from Huntingdon Town Council will have to give you a written answer on that one.
I'll just come to our planning officers because I believe that the play equipment belongs to HDC. So if I could just have clarification on that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that is correct. And we do have a speaker up next who is a member of the relevant team and should be able to provide some clarification for you on the play equipment.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions for this particular speaker? There are no other questions. So thank you very much for joining us this evening. And if you'd like to take a seat in the public gallery, that would be fantastic. We will welcome our next speaker, which is Julian Sutton, who is the agent We also have in attendance Andy Land, who is the project manager, and Helen Lack, and they will be able to answer any questions that you may have. So welcome. And when you're ready, if you just press the middle button and your microphone should go red at the top, and then you're ready to speak. You have 3 minutes in which to address the committee.
Thank you, Chair. Members. This application provides high quality improvements to Hinchinbrook Country Park through a nature first approach to preserve and enhance the park's environmental integrity to the benefit of existing wildlife, country park users and local residents. The application will create an enhanced and well-maintained natural environment to improve the quality of life for local residents and users of the park. And as you may be aware, the council's own historical research on parks shows that people are happier when they visit the park. It improves their mental health. So this application is intended to improve usage of the park from various sections of the community, to promote an atmosphere of mutual appreciation and respect, and will help increase and preserve the green heritage of Huntingdon, as well as, critically, increasing the value of the natural environment and enhancing the biodiversity of the park. Now, this is the second application for enhanced works on the park that we've submitted. A previous application was withdrawn because of concerns over potential impacts on the park's biodiversity. Now, as a consequence of that, we withdrew that application in order for us to give it some more thought, and in order that we can ensure that we bring forward a scheme which meets both the needs of the park users whilst still protecting and enhancing the biodiversity and nature capital of the park. And I think we've got it right. We do need to enhance the car parking, but the location is where there is least biodiversity impact. You will see from the officer's report that, and you'll have heard that we have support from Huntingdon Town Council, but also support from the Friends of Hinchinbrook Country Park. There is no objection from the Environment Agency, the local lead flood authority, the council's in-house urban design, tree officer, ecology officer, environmental health, all support the application. There's no objection from the county in terms of archaeology, highways or public rights of way. There are significant economic benefits as well with this application through the introduction of electric vehicle charging into the park, the improved countryside building, which will create jobs and provide an improved community resource for users and local residents. But critically as well, as you've heard, this application will improve the biodiversity of the park. Overall, through woodland enhancement, it will increase the BNG net gain through about 42%. So for all of those reasons, we would respectfully request that members support this application.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? Councillor McAdams.
Thank you. I've got two questions actually. I notice it makes mention in the report about great crested newts. Are we aware of any of that species in the area, and would it be affected in any way if it is?
Yeah, we are aware. There are great crested newts, and we are in the process of, subject to, once we've got this planning application approved, assuming it does get approved, then we'll be able to then get a license to undertake works, a European license to undertake works in relation to the newts.
My second question is with respect to the paths around, and people are going to be using cycles as well. Are we looking to have a separate sort of cycle way next to the walkway? In other words, is it going to be clearly marked where you cycle and where you walk? Because I always worry about accidents. Thank you.
In places, yes. So in particular, coming down the main access way into the park, where there's a shared cycleway coming down alongside the existing car park. The remainder of the footpaths are not being widened. That's a decision that's been taken due to impacts upon biodiversity and ecology. the sheer size and scale would have been quite a considerable impact. So they are remaining the same width. They will be resurfaced, which will improve usability for cycles as well as pushchairs, wheelchairs, etc. But they won't be demarked as such. They'll just be a shared space.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Councillor Sanderson, then Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think you were right earlier. The play equipment does belong to the District Council. Here it was installed by the Town Council many years ago. And that leads me into my question, which is probably best put to Helen at 7.110. I guess the equipment has just reached the end of its life, hasn't it? It's 20 years, as I discovered to my horror earlier when I realised I played a role in getting it installed, and it was 20 years ago. So I think it's probably just reached the end of its life, hasn't it? But the double slide will be retained, and the other enhancements will, I think, compensate for that.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. So we actually were lucky enough to bring forward the installation of 3 other play areas so that we could make sure that we had provision for the park users whilst this was going on, and we've already received some fantastic feedback for those play areas. You're right, Town Council did kindly donate that equipment to us. Like we've just worked out, I think it was nearly 20 years ago. This type of equipment, it's timber, tends to only have a lifespan of 12 to 15 years. So it's on a very regular maintenance program at the moment, and it's being quite heavily inspected. So it's very close to the end of its life. So this is perfect timing for us to do that. You are correct. The slide is staying. It's the iconic slide. I think anyone that's got children that have used the park have got photos of their kids at the top of it. So that will very much be staying. And just to confirm Lucy's comments about the zip line, that is not going to be moved. So it's going to be removed.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. Mine was going to be a clarification. It's been sort of answered already. It was about the cycleways, and actually was it up to County Council standards, but when you showed the pictures, it was quite a narrow cycleway, so cycle stroke footpath. But I think you've answered it in the fact you couldn't get it in, but for other reasons.
Thank you. Councillor Wakeford, and then Councillor Tevlin.
Thank you. You've helped me with the question I wasn't actually going to ask you, which is what assistance you give me in explaining to my 4-year-old and 7-year-old the rationale for why we're pulling out one of their favourite play areas. But of course, as you've identified, it's because their other favourite play areas came ahead to replace them. My question is really just as was touched on in your initial comments about the car parking over some of the green space, as I think you'd anticipate, that's probably the primary area of concern that may come up in subsequent discussion around the table. I just wonder if you could recap really the thought process around how you arrived at on the edge of the green space being the lesser evil compared to wherever else it might have gone, presumably including the middle of the green space or the trees, which I think people can probably understand why they might not be attractive. But just to elaborate the thinking around why this is a necessity to give up some of the green space, please, would be helpful.
Yeah, thank you. We've obviously, as was referenced, the council have done a lot of work in terms of the car parking usage, and I think anybody who's been there on a Saturday morning when the park run is on will see, there's a significant shortage of car parking at peak times for the park. So we did look at a number of different options for where we could locate some new parking. There isn't, the nature of the site is such that there isn't a not very nice bit of it. So it is very much going to be the lesser of the evils of the choice. From a terms of a biodiversity perspective, the area that we're sited on is low biodiversity value grassland. So while it's quite nice to look at, it doesn't actually hold that much habitat value. Obviously, the heavily wooded areas that are conveniently located to, next to the access road and would have been a perfect site for a car park are not particularly palatable either, due to the significant loss of trees that wouldn't even be worth discussing, to be honest. So we did look at a number of options. We seriously considered sort of 3 to show that we'd really properly thought about things and we could really look at those. 2 involved the loss of way too many trees. This one just involved the loss of some grassland, which, in the grand scheme of this location and this site is the lowest sort of biodiverse part of the park. It's also a location that's outside of the flood zone. So the lakes are obviously at the bottom of the hill. The flood line comes up the hill towards the woodland. This kind of location hits the sweet spot between not being in that woodland, but also being outside of the sort of the flood zone. So it's not going to be subject to flooding and therefore loss of use at various times during the year. Yeah.
Hiya, and just wanted to just add to that in terms of actually the shape of the car park. Obviously, it was shown that it's quite a wavy line that actually was done deliberately, not just for it looking super pretty, but actually as it follows the line of the woodlands, actually that buffer is actually very, very high in biodiversity value. So to create that space and protect that along the woodland was important to us, as was including the bunds that are going to be going around the car park. They are designed to support amphibian. Yes, they are. Yeah. Thank you. And butterflies and things like that. So actually, they will have northeast and southwest banks, so they can actually support those different types of species as well. So quite excited to see it. And hopefully they will actually help mitigate the look of a car park as well in the park.
Thank you. Councillor Tevlin.
Thank you. Whilst the majority of my question has already been answered, it's just again around the provision for children, why you couldn't put a new zip line in instead, and the rationale behind the other facilities for children. And also there was a barbecue area near there and quite a good place for families. So would that displace this? What else can be done in terms of that? Thank you.
So I don't believe we're actually looking to remove the barbecue areas if they were outside the period. There's 2 or 3 of those actually, and they're, as you say, they're very, very well used. In terms of the zip line, we made the decision to not move it because actually, if you can imagine a zip line, it has 2 ends, but then the section through the middle is quite a wide section of safety surfacing. That footprint was significantly damaging to the biodiversity of that area, that we decided that this wasn't the right time to be thinking about that, because actually where we would be moving it to is quite a high value grassland. So we're not going to move it over this time. And what we have done though is installed 2 or 3 play areas which actually have similar experiences. So in terms of play area design, you have experiences such as rocking, spinning, climbing. We've made sure we built all those kinds of features into those particular play areas as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? There are no other questions, so thank you very much. You might want to stay there because if there are any questions of clarification, our planners might come to you for support. So we'll move on to the next part, which is our debate. So who would like to start that? Oh, no, we want to go for questions of clarification. Sorry. So are there any questions of clarification for our planners? So Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of potential conditions, so paragraph 5.8 talks about the HEC landscape and biodiversity officer and the planting schedule not adequately mitigating the localised harm caused by the proposal. So I don't think, I might have missed it, apologies if I did, I don't think that was mentioned in the initial report. Can you just sort of clarify where we are with that point, please?
Yeah, so the concerns were the soft landscaping proposals, the actual species of plant proposed. There was concern from the landscape officer that these were ornamental non-native planting, and there would be a better opportunity within the country park to use native species. So what we've recommended is notwithstanding the approved plans, a condition to secure alternative planting proposals, and the applicant's aware of that, and I believe they're on board with that recommendation from the landscape officer.
Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question of clarification, 7.28. As the report says, the nearest residential properties are at Brecon Way and Dartmoor Drive. Obviously, 26 and 28 Brecon Way will be affected by the widening of the footpath. I'm assuming that they've been made aware of that and they haven't raised any objections.
Yep, so as part of the consultation on the application, letters were sent to both 26 and 28 Beacon Way, and I don't believe we received an objection from either properties.
Thank you. Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. It's just to clarify on the width of the footpath. Did county comment on it, or is it not one that's required by county, this locality? And are we comfortable with the fact that it is actually a potential additional risk, but balancing against the other aspects that have been mentioned earlier?
Yeah, so the footpaths, the widths are remaining the same as the applicant has said within the park. That's mainly because of being in areas of flood risk, increasing kind of the footpaths could potentially increase flood risk, as well as the impact on trees, the wooded areas, as well as ecology. So I think in an ideal world, perhaps they would have explored widening of footpaths, but wasn't kind of feasible with the constraints of the site. In terms of the county council, so we consulted highways as well as the public rights of way team, but the footpaths proposed to be resurfaced aren't public rights of way. So yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Adam, did you have a question? Clarification? No? Okay. Is there anyone else that has a question of clarification to the planners? There are no more questions, so we will move on to the debate. Thank you for joining us this evening. Okay. Councillor Sanderson.
Chair, as I think one of our speakers said, the application had to be delayed because of things that I think we're all aware of. Biodiversity, net gain, etc. We weren't quite ready this time last year, but it's good to see this application back. I think all our questions and points of clarification have been answered very thoroughly. Good to see the Town Council in support. So I'm very much supportive of this application. It's probably early to take a proposal, but when we come to that, I'm happy to propose approval. Thank you.
Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say I greatly support this application. I think it's very, very necessary. We've got a potential, well, not potentially, it's going to happen. We're going to have a big increase in population in the local area with the different projects that are coming to the fore. For all the different reasons, particularly health, mental health, etc., and the need for better facilities down there. I am very much in support of this. I also am pleased about the biodiversity. I was a little bit, not too happy about the fact that a couple of trees have got to come down, but I understand the need for that. The fact that we can meet or hopefully will exceed the 10% increase in biodiversity, and I've no doubt that in the future, as it matures, it's going to look more and more attractive as time goes by, and I welcome it. So thank you very much.
Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to elaborate on all what's already been said because actually the whole scheme looks like a massive improvement. Yes, there's always some downside from it, but I think the upside on it and on all the aspects I've seen is far outweighs any of the downsides. So with that, I'm going to propose that we accept it. If you'd like to take that one.
Thank you, and I'll accept that proposal. Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. After contributions we've had so far, I'll aim to be as pithy as Councillor Niche. There are clearly some trade-offs in here, principally around the green space versus car parking. I think the additional clarification we had from the applicants was enormously helpful on that, and hopefully gives us clarity about the thought process behind what's in front of us. For me, this easily meets the relevant planning thresholds, and I'd go beyond, like Councillor Niche, and say it feels actually a really strong application, and I'm pleased to see it to help protect Hinchinbrook Park for the years ahead.
Is there anyone else that wishes to speak on this? I need to have someone to second the proposal. Councillor Sanderson. So Councillor Sanderson is seconding the proposal. So I have a proposal of approval from Councillor Niche, which is seconded by Councillor Sanderson. All those that are for approval, please raise your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
That is unanimous, so we will move on to the next item on the agenda. The next item on the agenda is item 3B, which is a retrospective planning application, partly retrospective in Hollingwell cum Needingworth, and that's going to be presented to us by our planning officer, Lewis Tomlinson.
Thank you, Chair. So the application in front of you tonight is the Barn, Overcoat Lane, Needhamworth. The application seeks planning permission for partially retrospective application for the change of use of lands to use class B8, storage or distribution, to provide self-storage facilities, including the provision of storage containers. So that's just the plan showing the location of the site. The application relates to an area of land south of and including some land subject to an earlier approved retrospective application for the change of use of open storage and the siting of 2 shipping containers. In total, the additional land not considered under the full or the previous CLED applications amounts to approximately 4.5k meters squared and extends 62 meters south. So that's just an aerial image of the site. A more recent aerial image of the site, so you can see some of the shipping containers. And that's the location plan for this application. So the application is at committee tonight. It's the officer recommendation of refusal, differs from that of the parish council, which is one of approval. So you can see this there that you've got, this is location plan of the CLEDs. So this is the location plan for the full application. You can see the CLED is the land in blue, which is the top left-hand side. There was a further application for permission at the top right-hand side, and then this is an application for the rest of the site. So this is the site plan for the CLED. So you can see shipping containers, general storage area and workshop. You've got the site plan that was approved under the full, so this is area to the right. There's another plan which makes this a bit clearer as we go on. And that was for the site of 2 shipping containers retrospective. I think this plan is probably the clearest to understand tonight. So A is the CLED, B is the full that was approved following the CLED, and then C is the rest of the site tonight. So just go through some photos. So you've got, this is the site you can see, shipping containers. This is looking towards the entrance on Overcoat Lane. And this is looking towards kind of the back of the site. Again, looking southeast. And then you've got the shipping containers within the site, just general arrangement. Another view from Overcoat Lane. So the officer recommendation is one of refusal. The proposed change of use of land to use class B8, storage distribution, to provide an extension to accommodate further self-storage facilities, including the provision of storage containers, represents a 62-metre intrusion into the countryside beyond the existing operational site. The impact of allowing the extension of such a use, including the containers of further 62 metres into the countryside, would result in significant and demonstrable harm, both visually and upon the character of the area, for increased activity, vehicle movements within the site, and is contrary to policies LP3, LP10, parts B and C, LP11, LP12, particularly A, B, and C parts, LP19, Paras 129, D and E, and 135, B and C of the NPPF, and the provisions of the National Design Guide. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that report. We have two speakers on this particular application. Our first speaker is Councillor A. White from Holywell cum Needingworth Parish Council, and I believe they are online. So welcome. I'll just see if we can hear you first of all. Could you just say hello, if just so we can see if the microphone's working? Brilliant, thank you. The microphone is working. So you have 3 minutes in which to address the committee. So off you go. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The Parish Council considered full application in February 2025 and the supplementary documents in May 2025. In making its resolution, Council considered planning policy including LP10, LP5 and LP19, and also those of the NPPF. It was noted by the Parish Council that the site offers employment to local businesses and also provides a service to local residents. This site has a long history of applications, as the Planning Authority has previously approved a certificate of legal development in October 2021 and a subsequent application in 2022 for this site. The Parish Council considered that the Planning Authority had satisfied itself regarding policy relating to flooding and development in the countryside, although the red line site area has now exceeded the original boundary. The supporting documents from Cambs County Council considered in May answered questions raised by Parish Council members around access to this site and vehicle numbers. So on the balance, the Parish Council supports the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? There are no questions, so thank you very much, Councillor White, for joining us.
Chair.
Thank you. Our next speaker on this particular application is Tom Kilvert, who is the agent for this particular application. Welcome, and you have 3 minutes in which to address the committee.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, I'm Tom Kilvert from Brown & Co. As you've heard, the site forms a lawful storage yard, which has been in operation since the 1980s and was originally an HGV haulage yard. Our client has recently expanded their self-storage business in response to strong demand from local rural businesses and residents seeking an affordable storage solution. Many of those affected by the proposal are in attendance this evening. There are no objections from local residents. As you've heard, there's support from the Parish Council and 5 letters of support from individual businesses affected by this proposal. The applicant has worked closely with officers and there are no objections from the Highways Authority or the Environment Agency. And I'll take you back 3 years ago when the council approved the application on the wider self-storage site. And I read as follows from that previous officer's report. Whilst the site is outside of the defined settlement, the proposal will expand on existing B8 storage use at the site and would mutually complement the existing use. And they conclude, in this regard, the proposed location is in accordance with policy LP19. However, officers are now recommending you refuse this application as it's considered to be contrary to policy LP19. This is a complete contradiction with the council's previous assessment of the site. A refusal would severely impact on small rural businesses occupying the containers when the margins are already very tight. The applicant would need to consider their alternatives, including reusing the site as a possible haulage yard or double or triple stacking within the lawful storage area. However, our client wants to avoid these possible fallbacks. Officers are concerned about the extension of the self-storage yard into the open countryside, but this is considered to be a minor extension, with the shipping containers extending approximately 37 metres beyond the lawful area. The officer's reference to a 62-metre extension does not fully consider that this includes a landscape buffer, which will screen the site and provide biodiversity net gain enhancements. This should be considered a significant benefit and could be secured by condition. The proposal will also generate employment, as our client will employ a foreman to operate the site. Members, so the question I pose that you need to consider here are what are officers trying to control? The site forms part of a lawful B8 storage yard and has been extended to meet strong demand from the local population, including rural businesses. And what is the harm officer referring to? This application seeks to regularize the existing site activity and achieve betterment in terms of the landscape impact through extensive screening. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. I think in your remarks you mentioned double, triple stacking. You're referring to the existing permission. You're saying if you don't get permission for this further phase, then that's what you'll be left, or the applicants will have to do. They'll have to basically increase the height of the containers, the number of containers.
Yeah, because naturally our client would have to consider all options available, but that's one that they've, is a possibility. I think the important points to note is the lawful site area doesn't include any height restrictions in terms of how high those containers can be stacked. The actual additional 2 containers that were approved in 2022, they do include height restrictions, and our client would be minded to accept any condition with this application site area to be restricted in terms of any height restrictions, and that could be secured by condition.
Are there any other questions for this particular speaker? There are no other questions, so thank you for joining us this evening. So we will move on to questions of Councillor Niche. Did you have a question for? Oh, yeah. you wanted to get in there quickly. Okay. So Councillor Niche, you may start the questions of clarification for our planning officers.
Thank you very much. There's a couple of clarifications really, and you probably need to bring the slides up because I think it got a bit confusing as to which areas we are looking at, what's the extension, and which bits have got authorisation under different parts is one. And secondly, there seems to be a confusion as well onto the exact extent of the actual site, because I've got 37 and 62 mentioned, and it's trying to work out which measurements are taken from where, so at least we know how far it extends into the countryside. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. So in terms of, just to clarify, so A is the CLED, and the agent is correct that the CLED is for a B8 storage. There is no restrictions on that. So there's no height conditions, nothing. It's just B8 storage. In terms of B, where the full was approved, that was for 2 shipping containers only. So in terms of that is restricted to 2, but that's already been breached through because on this application, you can see there's some more shipping containers there that are already in position. So that's the retrospective element. In terms of 62 meters, that includes the rest of the red line. I think for clarification, you can see there it's not going to be the whole 62 meters, as some landscape buffering is proposed, which does reduce down the number. And I think 62 meters, it's probably not the most accurate or representation of the increase into the countryside. So members should just note that because of the landscape buffer. So I think in that case, when we're talking about 62 meters, what the case officer was referring to is the use extension. We've got to acknowledge that some of that will be given to landscaping and could be controlled. There was another question. Sorry.
There was going to be an additional one which asked about the height, but you just clarified that one. So A can be any height, B's restricted, but theoretically only 2, and C, just to clarify for my own mind, is the additional one. Is that right? Or is that, are we after looking at B and C?
So A is not within the red line, and that's the agent. A is declared. So that has a lawful use of B8 storage. That's not a planning permission. That certificate was granted for an excess of 10 years, so it became immune from enforcement. The certificate is quite clear, just says B8 use, doesn't specify height restrictions, what should be on there, nothing. So the lawful use is B8A, but that's outside the red line. This is not within this application, but what the agent is referring to here is their fallback position of that lawful use on the site. In terms of B, that is where the planning permission was approved. However, that was limited to 2 shipping containers and has been breached and forms part of the retrospective element of this application. So what we're looking at is B and C today. So it's that kind of increase, intensification, extension of the business. So yeah, it's a bit muddled, I can see that. But I think it's just to be clear, in terms of what members could do, obviously there's nothing to do with A. So to be clear, can't control anything A because it's outside the red line. B or C, you could control height, number of containers, etc. So just be clear kind of where the ability for members to look at this tonight lies. It's on B and C.
Councillor Nish.
And just to come back, on your previous slide, which had the blue and the red lines, is that the red line or is the blue line? Which part is that? That's showing, that's just land ownership, isn't it?
Let me just double check that site location plan. Sorry, bear with me. I wasn't the case officer, so just bear with me. So yes, that is the application site outlined in red on the screen in front of you, submitted with the application. And the blue is additional land owned by the applicant or within the control.
Could I just gain clarification with regards to the difference between a CLED and a planning application, please?
So for you, Chair, so a CLED is a certificate of lawfulness that can be applied on 2 bases. One is to demonstrate their use of a site is lawful. That could either be through the passage of time, the use of previous planning permissions. The other type of CLED you could get is around permitted development rights. So have they done something in accordance with permitted development rights? In this case, the CLED, so the certificate of lawfulness, was granted on the basis of that the use had been in excess of 10 years. A plan permission is different, and that's a proposal put forward for the assessment against policy. So to be clear, the certificate is an evidence-based approach. Obviously, the applications do look at evidence, but we also do an assessment side as well against policy. So that's the key differences.
Thank you. You also mentioned that that the CLED we weren't taking into consideration today. However, could you outline what exactly they have permission for on the CLED?
I think just to be clear, so in terms of the CLED is relevant because it's on the site. It forms the original basis for the lawful use of the site as B8 in relation to that top blue area. What I think is just be clear, members shouldn't look to control that part if members seek to go a different way from the officer recommendation. But in terms of it, it's still very much relevant to the assessment in front of you tonight. It's a material consideration. It's the fallback that's referred to by the agent and does form part of the wider site, but it's not within the red line.
Are there any other questions or clarification? Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Chair. So the agent made a reference to the previous planning application that's been approved and this current one, which is recommended for refusal, and an apparent contradiction. Can you shed any further light on why the previous one was approved and this one is recommended for refusal? I've got another question, but I'll pause there if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair, for you. So I think kind of just to clarify that, so as we've gone through, A was the certificate, B was for the siting of 2 shipping containers. I think looking at the site layout in front of you, in terms of what officers arrived at in terms of an assessment against LP19 is around the intensification and expansion beyond those kind of, one, the lawful use and the planning permission to be a lot more than 2 shipping containers and include more land extending further into the countryside. So I think in terms of looking at policy, it's not saying that the previous assessment was incorrect or this one is incorrect. It's a different situation. So what officers are now looking at is a much larger intensification expansion of a business, and therefore LP19 has to be looked at again.
Thank you. And if I continue, Chair, if that's okay. So, so my second question is just regarding demands for this facility. So obviously it's easier for us as a committee if applicants come for an application before the site's been developed or, you know, expanded. And so some of this has currently been, you know, so B is already expanded beyond the 2 that have got permission previously. The advantage, I guess, for the applicant is that it's quite a good way of showing demand for the facility by having it already partly built and, you know, having active customers there. Can you give us any advice on how demand or need for a business outside of the built-up area, how that affects, you know, to what extent is that a significant material consideration in our deliberations?
It's definitely part of the consideration. So I think part of any application is a balancing act here. So one of the things to look at is that kind of economic side, employment, the business side. I think as outlined in the officer report, there hasn't been sufficient information submitted with the application to demonstrate compliance or justification of LP19. Obviously tonight we can see there is a number of people that have turned up, but in terms of what officers are looking at when they're assessing the application, in terms of representations, economic information submitted or justification with the application, it just was insufficient. So officers arrived at that recommendation. But it's definitely something to be taken into account. Any commercial application, there's obviously economic benefits for allowing this. So yeah, it's not something to dismiss, but I think it's a balancing act. It's one of the material considerations to look at in the rounds. And I think the key thing here is LP19. So LP19 does support business in the countryside, but it has to meet a number of criteria. And what the officer report sets out is that it's insufficient information to justify compliance with LP19.
Thank you. Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you, Chair. My head's in a similar place to Councillor Pitt's second question. I turned to my copy of policy LP19 because I think it is going to be significant for us this evening. I suspect most residents would consider it right and proper that in our local plan we've got policies that seek to protect the countryside from being sort of randomly and arbitrarily built into, and policy LP19, as I understand it, but officers might wish to comment and elaborate, is essentially designed to ensure that there is scope for new business development and expansion of existing business in the countryside. But in order to stop that being abused, in order to stop that logic being applied to allow development across any parts of the countryside, there are criteria set out in it. And I think it's implicit from the officer report, well, probably explicit in places as well, and I think has been reiterated by officers in clarification now. In principle, there is possibility of a business meeting those criteria. We've obviously got other examples of businesses doing that, potentially including this one in elements of the site previously. But from my reading of the paper, the lack of evidence provision is significant in steering the advice we've had from officers this evening. So 7.47 of the report, in reflecting on planning balance at the end, talks about the applicant's attempts to demonstrate compliance with LP19 not being supported by evidence to substantiate their claims. For example, no details of actual capacity or demand for services have been provided, so it's unclear why the existing established containers are no longer sufficient for the needs of the business. I suspect that's a reference back to 7.21 in the principle of development section of the report as well, that discusses that point in more detail. I wonder if officers might just unpack for us the interpretation of LP19 as it applies here in terms of the nature of evidence that we might have expected or that might theoretically be possible from this sort of business in this sort of position, for us to, I suppose, reflect on what might be absent here. And I suppose what's in my head then next is whether in due course, as we get into debate, we might want to think about an alternative to making a decision this evening if there's scope for evidence that hasn't been brought forward if the applicant wanted to find it. But maybe just to start on the beginning bit of that, in just unpacking LP19, what the evidence we think it requires actually is in order, for example, to get an application like this over the hurdle of the principle of development.
For you, Chair. So I think the use of evidence might not be the best term here. I think, to be clear, officers have assessed the application on the information submitted, includes the planning statement, obviously have taken into account representations both from parish council and local residents. And like I say, there's a clear turnout of, as the agent has stated, people use the business here tonight. But that's not something we've had in terms of information submitted. I think, to be clear, so in terms of LP19, one of the things it talks about is rural business that needs to be located in the countryside. I think the CLED, like I said, when that was granted, that was on an evidence base that's been there for excess of 10 years. The planning permission was just for 2 shipping containers. Obviously, the application in front of us represents an intensification and expansion of that previous permission. And therefore, it's looking at LP19 whether this scale of business is appropriate in the countryside location. So I'm not sure it's an evidence is the best term. We're looking at the information submitted with the application. Like I said, it could be an economic statement. It could be representations received. It's not for officers to, I guess, fill in the gaps. We're here to assess what's submitted and what's put in front of us. And in this case, it's not been demonstrated to officers that the compliance of LP19 has been met. So it is a balancing exercise for members tonight to look at that in round. LP19 is one of the policies. It sits within the principal development, but it's up to members to kind of read that report as a whole and come up to their own judgment.
Yes, so sorry, through you, Chair, I can come back to Councillor Wakeford just to pick up on the point that Louise mentioned there. It's difficult for planning officers, planning departments to advise applicants of what the evidence should actually contain. I mean, it's not one size fits all, which is pretty much what Louise has just said. I mean, obviously we can work with applicants' agents to actually steer them in the direction of the policy, but that's unfortunate as far as any local planning authority can go, because there is that line between the professional side of the decision-taking process, the recommendations to yourselves as members, and then obviously advising them too far, then blurring that line between assessor and advisor, as it were. So we need to maintain that line and just steer them towards policy. So unfortunately, it's not a tick box exercise, but obviously in some instances it could be quite extensive. In other instances it could be quite short but punching to the point and hit the point on the head, as it were.
Councillor Wakeford, have you got one?
Councillor Butler, forgive me coming back on it initially briefly. That's really helpful, and I suspect members will fully appreciate the difference of roles officers have flagged there. At risk of parsing LP19 to death, though, I suppose if officers did feel able to signpost more specifically within LP19, which isn't hugely long, just sort of which specific clauses were particularly motivating the references to lack of demonstration in the report in terms of this element. I just wonder if that might illuminate matters slightly for the committee, because this may well be a particular point on which discussion turns in the next section of debate.
Free Chair. So I think just working through, and this is what the report sets out. So one, it's the opportunity to make more efficient use of land than the existing site boundary are not suitable for the proposed use. I think that relates to that extension beyond further into the countryside. And the other one is H, which is a scale carrot and site, and proposal will not have a detrimental impact on its immediate surroundings and the wider landscape. And then the last point is the rural business is one which has a legitimate reason to be located in the countryside. So I think when we're looking at this, because this is not a new business, it's an expansion of an established business outside of its operational side. And I think that's the key part for officers, is that A and B is what we'd consider the existing operational site, and kind of going back to what's lawful. One has a cleared, one has a planning permission on. In theory, it's expanding beyond that. It's that justification for doing so. So it's taking all of those criteria for LP19, and where officers have fallen is insufficient information to justify compliance. But like I say, LP19 isn't saying that no business can happen in the countryside. It's more of demonstrated that it's acceptable in order for it to be supported.
Councillor Butler, do you have a question of clarification?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just need to be clear in my mind. I understand the ones have got planning on. Are they asking for all extra on the yellow? Or is there a number that we need to look at if we decided to approve this application? I just need to be clear. Are we looking at the yellow boxes plus the white ones? Because you've got roughly 50 yellows there, which I take it as a container each, and then about 30 of the others. I mean, are we looking at, if we wish to approve, we're looking at 80 more containers?
So in terms of the plan in front of you, the dark yellow are containers that are already there. Whites are ones that are proposed to be added to the existing. And the pale yellow area is unrestricted B8 storage through the certificate. In terms of what members can do, in terms of conditions, whether they're reasonable, they meet the tests, you could, so one wood standard would be put on approved drawings condition, as always. That doesn't always go far enough because that just approves what's on the plan. So members could go far further and limit the number of containers. Members can limit the height of the shipping containers. So say one stack, no more than like single stack. To just pick up on conditions while I'm here, members can do conditions around landscaping for screening. They can pick up on biodiversity net gain. So there's a number of conditions you can do to control it, including also a condition around the use. Because if you grant planning permission, as we see for the CLED B8, you'd want to probably limit that to self-storage as well. So I think some of this is picked up in the report. The officer report does state this could be conditioned if members look to go against the officer recommendation. But I think, yeah, members would just have to be very clear on what they'd want conditioned and how far those conditions would go. But yes, all of those conditions would meet the tests. And the agent has previously indicated that such conditions would be agreeable as well.
The pale yellow are there. The dark yellow are also there.
Sorry, just to be clear. So the pale yellow is unrestricted B8 storage. But I think, yeah, consider it as part of the wider site, but not to control, unless the agent agrees that the condition could go beyond the red line. I think we just as officers would have to err on the side of caution because you can only assess what's in front of you as part of the application. But that being said, yes, so the dark yellow is what's already there.
Yeah, we couldn't I went this morning and couldn't access the site, so I was unaware of how deep the site was, and also the white ones are proposed extras. You're looking at 80 containers roughly, aren't you?
Thank you. Councillor Niche.
Yeah, it's just to further clarify, Councillor Butt was saying, so what you're saying, present, the application, I should have read it, is actually just for usage. So therefore, any amount could be put on. And the second one is it still liable? Because there seems to be a little bit of confusion as whether it was to somebody who spoke to me about whether it was still liable or not because of it, what it is. But that's a slightly different issue, a bit off track, but does say it is still liable in the report.
So in terms of SIL, obviously it's not a planning issue. It kind of works as a tax kind of situation. But yes, floor space created. So I believe it is SIL liable. In terms of the planning permission, I think, yeah, it's just going a bit beyond the standard approved drawings, and members could seek to control the number of shipping containers on there. I think what members have to be mindful of is once you grant a B8 storage use, it's then what measures do you put in place to control that? Like we see on the CLED, there was no control, so that's just unlimited B8s. That could be anything, height, whatever's going on there. With planning permissions, I think you want to seek to control that through conditions. So yeah, if members are minded to approve the application tonight, conditions around layout, height, use, number, and other stuff like landscaping would be appropriate conditions, which are outlined in the report.
Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. I've just been rereading LP19 and it's, well, I wouldn't say it's ambiguous, but it's open to interpretation. And I was looking at the item, the section that points to the expansion of an existing business, which I think arguably you could say this probably is. I think point G, it says it needs to avoid the irreversible loss of the best and most versatile agricultural land, so grades 1 to 3A. Is the land here within those grades? I'm not sure that it is.
So this is set out in the report, and no, it's not. So in terms of that criteria, officers are satisfied that that's acceptable.
I mean, Joe, I'm probably leaping ahead a bit when we come to the debate, but it seems like there is an opportunity to condition this application should members be inclined to grant permission, but I'm not sure if we're at that stage yet.
Are there any other questions of clarification for our planning officer? Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. Sorry to come back again, Chair. Councillor Sanderson set out sort of alluded to one possible route discussion might go in the next phase. If the committee were minded to go down a different route and, for example, to reflect that there, it felt like there was the possibility of demonstrating compliance against LP19, but felt that it wasn't in the papers before us for the committee any more than it was for officers. I don't know whether we are close up against any relevant deadlines, but would there be any route for us as a committee to defer decision tonight, ask officers to invite the applicant to produce some evidence to demonstrate to evidence the assertion which we might otherwise take on good faith but not feel able to make a decision on, and revisit this furnished by a little more, if not evidence, then a demonstration from the applicant to give us confidence why this is something that might meet that local plan policy, as distinct from all those applications that don't.
I might bring Richard Pitt into this in a second, just kind of the legal advice, because I think what you're hinting at, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the number of people that have turned up in support tonight as one of the things that have influenced.
Well, I'm suggesting that obviously we don't read a number of attendees directly into any decision that we make, but in the event we wanted to give the applicant opportunity to demonstrate that the business is well used, is much relied upon, if that hasn't been set out in the application, as was asserted in the remarks earlier, I'm wondering if there's a route for us to give them opportunity to do that in order to enable us to make a decision informed by some evidence beyond simply their assertion, precisely for the reason that we probably can't take the number of people in a public gallery as determinative of anything, which would seem quite a dangerous precedent.
Yeah, so I think in terms of need to look at what's in front of you, it's similar to, say, if a speaker came to committee tonight and said something completely different or brand new that wasn't in the application or previous comments, officers would advise members to disregard that. So I think it's a similar kind of situation. In terms of a deferral to allow the applicant the opportunity to submit further information, I think members would just have to be very clear on what they would be looking to receive. So I think like you've hinted at, is it letters of support? Is it an economic statement? That kind of justification. As long as members are clear to the applicant and it's reasonable for the applicant to go away and produce that information, then members, if they're minded to, could defer on that. I think with all deferrals, members just need to be very clear on what are you deferring it for? What do you think what is the information you don't think you have, or what needs clarifying in order to make a decision? I think where officers stand, they have assessed the application. Obviously, information has come in to address highways and stuff, but officers have assessed the application as submitted. So if members go down the deferral route, they need to be very clear on what they're deferring for and whether that's a reasonable time frame. Obviously, we've got the agent here, so they'll be able to indicate whether that's reasonable. But yeah, in terms of, I think also, like Sean said, it's not for us to advise applicants what's missing. But I think, yeah, you've obviously clearly mentioned a number of things that you may feel necessary to justify. That answers your question. I think
it does.
We'll just bring in,
I think.
Yeah, I think Sean just and Richard want to come in.
Sorry, through you, Chair, just to pick up on that. Yeah, sorry, just to pick up on that point. Whilst it is within the member's gift to possibly look at that route, take a vote and so forth, the difficulty with that is, or potential difficulty with that is, if a time frame set, and if the applicant or their agent aren't able to source that information within that period, then effectively the application is no further along and the recommendation could remain as it is. And it's just how far it's reasonable to move that further back again and again and again. And it could become very protracted, and it may not get to the position where potentially it's either support, it could still be, unfortunately, a recommendation for refusal. So it's just the reality of that, and if that is a fair stance to take. Thank you.
Councillor Brereton, have you got a question of clarification for the planning officers? Lovely.
Thank you, Chair. On the drawing there, you've got the asterisk on the barn, and it says from there to the southern boundary, I think southern boundary, is 62 metres. But from the road to that asterisk is 34, 37 metres. Is that correct? Or is it 62 metres from the road to the end of the site?
So in terms of the asterisks, it's from there to the south of the site is 62 metres. That's what's outlined in the report and on the slide in front of you.
Thank you. So the total will be 90 something metres? 100 metres? Yeah.
Can't confirm that, but are you saying from the entrance to the rear of the site? I can't confirm that tonight. Like I said, I think the difficulty is, sorry, I've picked this up. We're going off the officer report. We haven't got measurements drawn out onto the plans, but my understanding is 60 metres from the asterisk to the south of the site. So then, yeah, if you're kind of making a guess, it could be around 90, 100 would be a relative guess.
Okay, are there any other questions? Councillor Niche.
I've got even more confused now because I'm not convinced that's right. I thought it was from the road. If you looked at the previous one, which had the red outline, I thought that was 62 metres, which is from B, the road, to the bottom green line, and then take off a little bit of hedging. I thought that's what was explained earlier.
There you go. I'll just bring in our planning officer.
Yes, sorry, through you, Chair. It's from the information we've got in front of us, apologies, we can't confirm that is the exact distance, but we do know that obviously it's as the report's worded, it was that overall concern, that further increase that the officers were concerned with. And just to confirm that the plan that's with the papers this evening, on page 63, there is a scale on that, but that scale is taken if the paper itself was at A3 rather than A4, so you can't really use that scale against the drawing that's there, unfortunately. That would unfortunately give misleading information, otherwise I would be doing that now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of clarification for our planning officers? Okay, so we've had quite a few questions of clarification, so that leads us on to the discussion. So who would like to start the discussion for me? Councillor Dawson, thank you very much.
Concerns I have with this, my personal concern is that currently they've got the site A that has got 35, that currently has potential to put another 70 on there. They've already got another 49, which could go up to 80. I just look at, I'm amazed that there's been nothing from highways to give us concern over the intensification of traffic. But I have a concern that if you're going to that extent, and 80 just on site B and C, where it's showing B and C, and we managed to cap A at 35, that's still a hell of a lot of traffic. And that is a concern I have, especially just further down the road. There is a housing site. It's a single track road, and that is my concern I have at this point in time. But it's a shame that highways haven't given us a direction to help us support that as an issue. But I'll listen to the rest of the discussion to see which way I go.
Thank you very much. Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. I must admit, I thought this was quite simple to start with. And the more I looked into it, the more confused I got from it. First of all, I thought, I looked at it and thinking, and actually knowing the location quite well, you don't realise what is there because it is pretty well hidden. But it is, in my view, in the countryside. I don't think that's overly disputed. But I think it's that growth potential within the countryside, which starts getting towards the merger bit of thinking, well, A is already allowed under CLED. There's a little bit of B, which has unfortunately gone way beyond. So that's something people need to be aware of. So it's retrospective and enforcement of, obviously had a little chat there. Again, a shame. I think the confusion is how deep does it go or not go? Because my clarity was that it's probably double the length as opposed to 3 times the length. And when you look at the previous slide, which shows the blue, which confused it even more because you've got to knock that bit out. There's not a lot. It's a real shame evidence hasn't been supplied because, yes, as Councillor Wakeford's mentioned, you don't go from the people, unfortunately sitting behind me, so I can't actually see them, but I know there's quite a number there. But I'm personally aware, which is no use to hear, that, the majority of it, if not all, I don't know that, is used by local people and local businesses, and it is a local businessman. So the disappointment is potentially that if it'd gone through the correct routes, we wouldn't be in this situation where we are. I mean, it's highly beneficial from a local perspective. It's a business there and does growth, and that maybe was starting to swing me on the LP19, because as you're aware, I hate, and a number of you hate, anything that goes out into the countryside. It is reasonably well screened. My concern is if we go along with the refusal on this one, is that we've lost a little bit of control in one particular area, whereas we could put stuff through and say we could control it and say this is the height, this is the maximum number, maybe, but we've got to sort out the officers. So on the balance of it, where I thought at one stage, I'm not too sure on this. I think it probably is refusal, straight countryside, bang to rights. The more I looked into it and the more I'm hearing tonight, I got more confused and I'm more moving towards actually, we could control this a little bit, limit some of the height or limit the height. I know we can't in A, although again, the agent may well say, well, I'm happy to do that. But as been pointed out by Lewis, is that that's a bit of dodgy ground. So maybe I'll listen to the rest of the debates as well, but with some more conditions, it might become more acceptable, despite the lack of some information, which probably would have helped us big time and made it slightly simpler from LP9's perspective. Because the rest of it, yes, it floods, but that's been discounted because actually it's been there for a long while, so it's not particularly in interest. Yes, it's grade 3, probably agricultural land, as was a long time ago. It wouldn't be put back into use, as we know, and that says it in the report. Highways, interestingly, have not commented on it. It's not an in and out job, but there is no restriction on it. So we can't even look at highways and say, yes, that single track road is a nightmare, the fact that majority of locals use it for different reasons, and some of it is just pure storage. We don't know that. So there's a lot of unknowns in that, which always worries me. But I think, on the balance at the moment, I'm a little bit tilted towards, I think if we accepted it with a bit of conditions, it might be beneficial, as opposed to the knowledge, of course, is that those containers that are there, we shouldn't say illegal, but shouldn't be there at present. People have got to find where they're going to go and somewhere else to store their stuff. But that's not a planning reason. But it's just, my point is, looking at growth in the economy for locals, it's very important.
Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. And I suppose further to where Councillor Niche left that thought, it's not a planning consideration for us immediately, but it's probably helpful to have in mind that unless officers wish to say otherwise, the effect of refusal tonight presumably isn't that the enforcement team go in tomorrow with the heavies sort of dragging all the containers off the site. Conversations continue, which officers would be better placed than me to describe around how you regularise the site as part of our standard enforcement policies. So I would presume there's not a cliff edge tomorrow morning, no matter what decisions we make tonight. But I think further to the other reflections Councillor Niche helpfully offered there, I think there may well be a planning application that could come forward on this site for some number of storage containers that might be capable of approval. As we so often remind ourselves, and we've said several times tonight, of course, we're not considering a hypothetical potential planning application that's got more information in it, or that might be for a slightly smaller number of containers. We're considering the application that's in front of us. And I find it extremely difficult to fault the reasoning that we've had presented to us from officers. I'm struggling to see how we can justify approving this application in the form that it exists, while also justifying utilising the measure of power and control that our planning policies give us, including LP19, to limit overdevelopment of the countryside, albeit for potentially individually in isolation good reasons. So I struggle to disagree with what's in front of us. My fairly strong reflection is if the business is right in what the agent speaking on behalf of the applicant this evening, I think suggested that there's significant usage, the level of development in excess of what's currently permitted is being relied upon by lots of businesses. That feels relevant to share in some clear way as part of a planning application, but I don't think it looks like we've got that before us this evening. So I think I'm probably erring and minded on the side of refusal on this one, alongside a firm encouragement to come forward constructively in discussion about an application that does give us justification for why this is an application or a future version of this is an application we could approve, consistent with controlling development in the countryside. But I keep an open mind, of course, Chair, and interested in what other colleagues might wish to come back on in that as well.
I would just bring back in the planning officer about the map and the distances, as they've been having a look at that while we've been discussing the application.
Thank you, Chair. So just like to apologise. In order to fit stuff on the PowerPoint, it turns out that the plan was shrunk, which has not helped the situation. So we've now got the correct plan to the correct scale in front of you. So to be clear, in terms of what we're looking at, 37 metres, so about 40 metres, let's just take it's from that pale yellow line to the edge of the containers, 37 metres. The 62 metres is from the pale area all the way to the edge of the red line site. I think we were confused as well. apologies. Obviously, like we said, the case officer isn't here tonight, so we're going on what's in front of us, and the plan was squeezed just to be able to fit more text on. I'd like to apologise for that. So yeah, so that, if that's all clear for members, what you're looking at, the 2 metres is from the yellow to the edge of the landscaping. And I think this is the point that the agent made, is that the first 7 metres is yellow to the edge of where it's shown for the shipping containers. The point the case officer was making is that the granting of plan permission on the site of the 60 metres would be for B8. This is the point that I made earlier. Just had to acknowledge that some of that area would be given up to landscape buffer and could be controlled through conditions. So it goes back to that point, I think, as laid out in the report, it's touched upon a couple of times. There are a number of conditions which members could go with if they're minded to go against, but I hope at least this plan clarifies the situation. So again, yeah, sorry about that.
Thank you very much. It says Councillor Saunderson. Oh, sorry, I could only see 3. So Councillor Pitt, do you want to go first?
Thank you. I think mine's in a similar place to Councillor Wakeford. So my view is this kind of development would ordinarily not be allowed in the open countryside. So it needs to be an exceptional reason to deviate from that kind of default position. And I think we don't have the evidence to demonstrate why that might be the case. There was sort of a conversation around whether we could defer for extra information, but I think that sets a sort of a expectation is just a little bit more information is all we need. Actually, there's a quite significant test that I think we need to explore, as it were. And so for me, essentially, lots of people would like to develop in the open countryside because it's probably cheaper than developing in urban spaces. That's not good enough. It's got to be something more significant. So if there is a reason along the lines of, this can only be here and it supports the wider economy to a significant level, that's the sort of information I'd be interested to understand. And that would make me more likely to consider approval. But I think as it stands, I'd be inclined to put forward a refusal.
Councillor Tevlin and then Councillor Saunderson.
Thank you. I'd be minded to go down the route of deferral. I think there is enough to say that this is currently in business use. There are those in need of the business. We just don't have that clarity with us in front of us. And I'm just mindful that it's got to this point already. Enforcement will have to be looked at if we refuse. So my view is I'd rather we come to a proposal of deferral, although I know that's open to other councillors tonight. And that's just where I stand. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Saunderson.
Thank you, Chair. It's been, I think, one of the most interesting applications I've known on sitting on this panel, and I think the debate has been very good. It's a very close application in terms of deciding approval or refusal, but I'm inclined to agree with Councillor Pitt and Councillor Wakeford on this. I just don't think there's sufficient information here. They are partly compliant with LP19 as we heard earlier, and certainly the clarification on the distances has helped, but I'm still erring on the side of caution here. I'm inclined to support the officer recommendation here. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any councillor that hasn't spoken? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I agree with you all. It's this is a difficult one, and that's why we're here. I went down there today. The road is very narrow. The new chicken farm will create quite a bit more traffic. But I feel there is a need for this sort of thing, and I would prefer to go down the route of control, that we stipulate the numbers of containers that are on site. It's got a previous use as a haulage yard, so, and it's got approval for 3 lorries. So, the industrial side of it's there. The grade of the land, obviously it's not been farmed for a long time. It's a no great value as far as that goes. But I would prefer that we controlled it and we controlled the boundary and we controlled the depth of the site where containers would be allowed, which looks to be 42 metres. So that's my thoughts on it. Whether I get any support or not, I just think that's a common sense way. There is, in my mind, there's proof of need. I know these sort of sites. We've got one in my village. I've looked at them all over the district. And generally I support them because it's a cheap way of getting a container. Well, I assume it's cheap. It's cheaper than hiring a unit on an industrial site. It's development, which is what we're all about. We're looking to create development and create jobs. And I just feel that this would do that under our control. How we control it, I'd be guided obviously by the officers as to what we can and can't control. But I will propose that we accept the application. I'm sorry to go against officers. That's something I very rarely do, as you know. But I just feel that there is a need for this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Clark and then Councillor Brereton.
Thank you, Chair. I agree entirely with Councillor Butler. I'm sat here listening to everybody else. I've worked out in my simple mind that 5,600 square metres is about an acre and a half. There's plenty of plots with one house on in that area, covers that. So I think the size of the plot, I think you can ignore. Why I come to my decision, there's already A, which we know we're not including, but if we turn this down, there's nothing to stop them going up 4i with they can put as many on there as they like. And I suspect, as a common sense businessman, I suspect they would be like me. They would prefer to spread them out over the rest of that for economy and working easy. And I listen to what we say about LP 19. I firmly believe that we should support it. I wouldn't have went down the route if we hadn't have had site A. That would be, or B, I wouldn't have entertained it, but we've got it, and I think it would be a way of tidying it up. So I will second the proposition.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. I'll take that as seconding the proposal to accept the application. Councillor Brereton, you haven't spoken on this particular.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Butler and Councillor Clark. This established business since before 2010. They're trying to expand. It's an established business. Another 40 metres into the open countryside, perhaps, but it's well screened down the sides. We can condition how far it goes, what the screening is at the bottom. We can condition how many containers are on there. We can condition the height. We can make it work. So I agree with them, and I should be supporting it. Thank you.
I've also got some councillors that wish to contribute again to the debate. Is it something new to the debate that you want to bring, Councillor Niche?
Only if you allow me, Chair, because I'm starting to write down some initial thoughts on conditions as it's been proposed and seconded. Now, I'm always open to obviously the wiser heads on whether we can or can't condition certain things, because I was actually going to second it after Councillor Butler. And I think it's already been said, things I think we can condition is height is definite one. Whether we can condition A, I think we've already established probably not unless there was an agreement. But again, that's probably a fairly loose one, but we can condition height of C and B. The numbers, the total numbers, I think is one, but I haven't worked out what those total numbers will be. But I think there is a number game in that one, and that's where we got a bit of an awkward one as to how condition numbers if we haven't worked out what they might be. I'm not sure the type of storage comes in under it, because I should imagine that comes under other things like environmental health and things like that, whether it's hazardous and things like that. Time of use, maybe another condition of when it can be accessed and egressed. Lighting, I believe there is lighting there, but I'm not 100% sure. But if there was or isn't, and they wanted to put lighting, that we ensure that was obviously environmentally friendly, down lighting only. A proper landscaping agreement for the boundary. And ensuring that the locality of waste and rubbish is cleared, because there has been issues in the past which of stuff coming across onto the roadway. And I just think from a local growth position, I mean, my original one will be I stick to policies, as you know, and this is potentially going away from LP19. But actually, the more I looked into it, the more I thought, well, actually, it isn't. The trouble is, as some of the others said, we haven't got the evidence. It's only a bit of knowledge, and whether we can contain and condition of its usage from a locals, I very much doubt, because I think that would be too restrictive. But yeah, as I've said, I do know a number, but whether they're all are there. But that's the conditions, some of the conditions I'd look at if they were feasible, if the panel then if the group then decide that they would approve it.
Okay, so lastly, Councillor Goulson, and then we will have to go to a vote. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. It's already been picked up by Councillor Nash. I was going to be saying about a transport plan so that we can get times and see if that could be conditioned so it's reasonable. And so it was just on both same sort of lines.
I overlooked Councillor Wakeford because he had his hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to come back briefly to Councillor Tevlin, who floated a deferral, which is where my head was earlier this evening, but I found Councillor Pitt's reflections on that persuasive, which is why I've gone from that view to being minded to refusal personally. What I would invite colleagues to reflect on prior to voting on the proposal that we've got on the table is simply what approving this on the basis of what's in front of us does to our ability to properly control development in the open countryside, albeit for good economic development reasons. I think Councillor Niche has really helpfully picked up between him and the conditions that Lewis touched on earlier. I have no additional suggestions to make on that one. I'm certainly fully in favour if we're going to approve this in whatever form of it having conditions, though on balance I'll vote against the proposal on the table. But I'd reflect as well, of course, if the applicant comes back with another application in the event of refusal, then of course we can condition that and we can go through exactly the same process that's just been outlined, just on a more manageable area and with greater grounds for us to make a decision.
Okay, so we've had a proposal from Councillor Butler, which has been seconded by Councillor Clark, for accepting the application, but with conditions. I just want to bring in our planning officer to advise us on which conditions we could vote on.
So yeah, so just following on from Councillor Niche, your list. So 3 years would be kind of the standard one, acknowledging some of it's retrospective, but some of it's proposed. Standard plans condition. I think then in terms of whether members could control the number of containers, I think we can go off the plan submitted. The only thing I'd advise on that is that currently you'd only be able to condition what's in the red line. Members could always delegate that with officers to go away, discuss with the applicant whether they're willing to take the blue line as well. I think you just have to be mindful right now that it's the red line. So you could condition that plan exactly. We can specify the number of containers on it, height of shipping containers, or in another way to say it is single stack or double stack, or say to clarify. I think in terms of the use about it, it would be good to condition the use of it as self-storage for shipping containers. I think with all kind of use classes, especially with something like B8 storage, it's normally quite good to be quite clear on exactly what the use of the site is. It can cover so much. So that's something for members to be mindful of, is actually tying down to that B8 use. The description of development only goes so far, so just be mindful of that. Landscape, so screening, the buffer at the bottom, that could be included. I think B&G was mentioned earlier on, and sides, yeah. So a landscaping plan to include screening of south boundary and sides, B&G, so biodiversity net gain, lighting, and then there was discussion around hours of operation. I think members would need to delegate that for discussion with the applicant, just mindful that if you set hours here, you've got to understand how they're operating at the moment, whether, yeah. So I think hours of operation, yes, but to delegate, to discuss with officers. And then just picked up environmental health, have recommended condition, no HGVs, 7 tonnes or more shall enter or leave the site between the hours of 11 and 7. So I think that just covers the business itself. So I think that catches maybe your transport thing in there. If that's everything for members to consider.
Councillor Clark, as you proposed, sorry, Councillor Butler, as you proposed that, sorry, are you happy with those conditions that have been rejected?
Yeah. I just wondered, I don't suppose it's possible, but I mean, because of the narrowness of the road, I wonder, could we condition a passing place be made? No.
Through you, Chair. Unfortunately not, because the highways hasn't requested that, I'm afraid, so we can't really ask that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy with those conditions, Chairman, unless any of the other members have any other.
And Councillor Clark, you're happy with those conditions? Okay. So we are going to vote for approval of this application with the conditions that we've heard from our planning officer, also delegating timings of operation and the conditions to our chief planning officer. So all those for approving the application with those conditions, please raise your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
And those against?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And any abstentions? No abstentions. So that proposal has been accepted along with the conditions. So we will move on to item 4 on the agenda. We'll just let people leave so that we can hear you. Okay, we'll resume with the meeting. We'll go on to item 4, which is appeal decisions, which Sean Robson will outline for us.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The only thing to draw members' attention to are just the 2 decisions that have been allowed. The first one that was allowed, and there was an award of cost to the appellant in that particular one. It boiled down to it was a certificate of lawfulness, lawful development certificate. It boiled down to very, very small matter of law that the inspector picked up on, which officers unfortunately wasn't aware of because it was that minute, that obscure. But in that particular case, the appeal was allowed and there was an award of costs to the appellant in the sum of £1,000 £794. So in the scheme of things, not a massive amount, but obviously still a chunk of cash. And then there's the other point to mention was the application, which was a variation of a condition. It was a strategic application at Brompton Park, and that was just a disagreement with planning judgment. The inspector thought the officers got it wrong. That just related to some revised plans, or there was the original approved plans. These were slight tweaks on them. The authority thought they'd gone a little bit too far. The inspector thought it was perfectly fine.
Thank you. So that brings us to the end of our meeting. So I'd like to thank everyone that was involved in the discussion this evening and for the hard work that the planning officers have put into writing this reports and presenting this evening. So with that, that's the end of the meeting.